All right, if you're gearing up for the Queensland bar, you know this already. A perfect affidavit is not just admin work, it's one of your most fundamental skills. This piece of paper is literally your client's voice in court, and getting it wrong is simply not an option. So today, we're going to tear down the Uniform Civil Procedure rules, specifically Rules 431 to 436, to give you a rock-solid blueprint for every affidavit you draft.
And this really is the question that matters most, isn't it? Because the stakes here are sky high. One tiny mistake in how you've put it together, and the whole thing could be deemed inadmissible. That doesn't just hurt your case, it could absolutely cripple it. And let's be honest, it does nothing for your reputation as a barrister. So the goal here today isn't just to know the rules, it's to have them burned into your brain.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to follow the entire life of an affidavit. We'll start with its basic structure, the anatomy, under Rule 431. Then we'll get into the critical signing and witnessing part with Rule 432. We'll tackle some of the tricky stuff like special cases and alterations, then nail down our exhibits with Rule 435. And finally, we'll look at the all-important safety net, Rule 436, for when things don't go perfectly to plan. Okay, let's start at the very beginning, the foundation, Rule 431 of the UCPR. I want you to think of this rule as the architectural blueprint for your affidavit. Every single one has to follow this structure. Getting these little details right from the get-go is what stops your document from being picked apart on a technicality later. Right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of Rule 431. First up, Subrule 1, you have to use the approved Form 46. Don't get creative. Subrule 2, you have to include a note with the signatory's name and which party they belong to. Now, Rule 431, Subrule 3, this is so important. Write it in the first person. It's, I saw this, not the deponent states that. This shows the evidence is coming straight from them. Subrule 4 says you need their full description, occupation, address. And finally, to make everyone's life easier in court, Subrule 5 demands numbered paragraphs, and Subrule 6 says you have to number every single page. Simple stuff, but so easy to forget. So now we move on to what I like to call the ceremony of it all, the execution. This is all covered by Rule 432, and it's how an affidavit is officially born. But be warned, this stage is a minefield of procedural traps. A simple slip up here can have massive consequences, so let's walk through it very carefully. Okay, listen up, because this is a big one that catches so many people out. It's not just the last page. It's not just next to the jurat. Rule 432, Subrule 1 could not be clearer. The person signing the affidavit and the person witnessing it must sign every single page. Why? It guarantees the integrity of the document and stops pages from being sneakily swapped out later. It's non-negotiable. Before we go any further into Rule 432, we need to be crystal clear on this term, the jurat. It sounds like fancy legal jargon, but it's just the formal statement at the end. It's the witness's official confirmation that everything was done by the book, when it was signed, where it was signed, and who was there. Rule 432 is super specific about what this jurat has to say. And this is where you need to pay close attention, because the rules change depending on how many people are signing. For just one person, Rule 432 Subrule 3 lays out the standard requirements. But if you've got a joint affidavit, you need to look at Rule 432 Subrule 5. The jurat has to name each and every person, and for each person, it has to specify if they swore on a religious text or just affirmed. If you miss that little detail, the whole thing could be invalid. So, who can be this all-important witness? Well, the Oaths Act gives us a list. You've got your JPs, your lawyers, conveyancers, and so on. But, and this is a huge but, the UCPR gives us a critical exception in Rule 441. Burn this into your memory. A party in a legal proceeding can never witness an affidavit for that same case. It is an absolute, undeniable conflict of interest. Don't even think about it. Okay, we've nailed the standard procedure. But let's be real. Cases are rarely standard. What happens when things get complicated? This section is all about those curveballs. What to do with signatories who have physical limitations, covered by Rule 433, and how to properly handle those last-minute changes, which is all governed by Rule 434. This is a situation you will absolutely face in your career. You have a client who wants to provide evidence, but for whatever reason, they can't physically read the document or sign their name. You can't just skip the formalities. Luckily, the rules saw this coming, and Rule 43.3 gives us a very clear procedure to follow. In this scenario, the witness has a much bigger job to do under Rule 433. They have to add a special certificate right below the jurat. And in that certificate, they must confirm 3 things. 1, that the affidavit was read out loud to the person. 2, that the person genuinely seemed to understand it, and 3, that the person clearly indicated it was their affidavit. This isn't just a box-ticking exercise. It's a crucial safeguard for vulnerable people. Let's talk about something that happens all the time. That heart-stopping moment when you've printed the final version, you're sitting with your client, and they spot a mistake, a typo, a wrong date. You can't just cross it out and write over it. Rule 434 is incredibly strict about how you handle this. So here's the deal under Rule 434, Subrule 2. Every single change needs 2 sets of initials. It must be initialed by both the person signing the affidavit and the witness, right there in the margin next to the change. If one of them forgets, that change is legally worthless and a judge can refuse to even look at the affidavit. But Rule 434 also contains an absolute ironclad bright line rule. It's a command about what you can never ever do once the signing is complete. And here it is. Rule 434, Subrule 3, is as clear as it gets. Once that affidavit has been sworn or affirmed, once it's been signed and witnessed, it is set in stone. It is locked. You cannot change it, not a single word. If a change is needed after that point, you have no choice. You have to draft a whole new affidavit. Look, an affidavit is just a story until you back it up with hard evidence, and that evidence comes in the form of your exhibits. Rule 435 is the boss here. It tells you exactly how they need to be identified, certified, and presented. If you mess this part up, your crucial proof might not even get a look in from the judge. Let's quickly run through the exhibit checklist from Rule 435. First, under Subrule 5A, every exhibit needs a unique label like JD-1 for John Doe's first exhibit. Next, it needs a certificate. That's Form 47, which gets signed by both the signatory and the witness, as per Subrule 6. And finally, under Subrule 8, the exhibits have to be filed right there with the affidavit. They're a package deal. Now, in any serious piece of litigation, you're not going to have just one exhibit. You might have 20, 50, even 100. The last thing a judge wants is a disorganized mess of loose papers. For this exact reason, Rule 435, Subrule 11 gives us a clear, professional way to present them. If you want to make a judge happy, and believe me, you do, you need to follow Rule 435, Subrule 11 to the letter. You bind your documents into neat, paginated books. At the front of each book, you put a single certificate, Form 47, and right after that certificate, you put a clear index. This isn't just about being tidy. It's a mandatory requirement that shows respect for the court's time. So what happens when you mess up? Despite all your best efforts, a page isn't signed, the jurat's wrong, an initial is missing. Is all that work for nothing? Is the affidavit completely useless? Well, not necessarily. Let's talk about the aftermath and the potential lifeline you have under Rule 436. Okay, Rule 436 is your potential get-out-of-jail card. It gives the court the power, the discretion to say, okay, there's a mistake here, but I'm going to allow it anyway. Now, this is not a free pass for being sloppy. You'll still have to stand up and argue why the court should accept it, but it does mean that a minor slip-up doesn't automatically kill your evidence. And finally, let's step away from the rules for a second and talk strategy. This quote from Justice J. Henry is pure gold. While the rules allow you to file a joint affidavit, he's giving you a huge hint here. He's saying they're not very convincing because memories can influence each other. His advice? Only use them for simple, formal matters where nobody's going to argue about the facts. For anything important, stick to separate affidavits. So there you have it. We've gone through the blueprint, the execution, the tricky parts, and even the fixes. These rules, 431 to 436, are the tools you need to build a piece of evidence that is absolutely bulletproof in court. So the only real question left is, the next time you draft one, will it be ready for a judge's intense scrutiny? After today, your answer should be a very confident yes.